A few key terms when it comes to integrating sources into your writing. Your first option is to quote the author's words directly. This is usually the easiest way to integrate an author's material, and it's totally fine to use quotes. But there are certain times where you need to paraphrase or use your own wording, such as if the quote is very long, or if you're just summarizing an author's points. So we can quote them directly. When we paraphrase, you're using your own wording to convey the same ideas. And when you paraphrase an idea, you still need to cite the author because it's their idea. So remember to cite the author, whether you paraphrase or you quote. We're always going to use that signal phrase with the author's name, and if there's page numbers, we'll give a page number as well. If there's a website with no page numbers, remember we don't have to include a page number. So it just depends. So that's quoting and paraphrasing. Patchwriting is when you fail to fully put the quote into your own words. So you've kind of reworded it. Maybe you got a thesaurus and you switched out a few words, but you kept the sentence in the same order. You've got the same structure. Or maybe you reorganized the sentence in a different order, but you borrowed too much of the original phrasing. And you didn't quote it, but you didn't quite reword it, so it's kind of in between. Most teachers will consider patchwriting a form of plagiarism, even if you cite the author. If you use too much of the original wording without quotations, then it's still not correct. So let's look at an example of patchwriting. Here we have the quote, "A high price tag is not the only attribute that endows an object with status." So we've got our author here. We've got our quotation. If we drop this into our paper and we want to quote it directly, we would simply say, "According to Zamora," and then we're going to drop that quote in there, right? And so we're going to put quotation marks around it, just like that. And then we're going to need to put our page number in there if there's a page number. So that's easy, right? Signal phrase, we follow the rules for integrating quotation that we talked about, and we're good to go. Now let's say I want to reword this instead of quoting it directly with quotation marks. So if you ever use their exact words, you have to use quotation marks. Absolutely, every single time. If you're using their exact phrasing, quotation marks. Even if you just use a piece of this sentence, if it's word for word, put quotation marks around it. Let's say you want to reword it. You're going to paraphrase it. Well, if you're going to paraphrase, let's take a look at some examples. So up here we have our original quotation. Let's take a look at my attempt to paraphrase here. So here's our original quote. "A high price tag is not the only attribute that endows an object with status." Here's my paraphrase. Zamora explains that a steep price tag is not the only quality that gives status to an item. So I want you to pause the video now and look at these two sentences and think, have I fully reworded this sentence? Am I conveying the same idea in my own words? Or is my wording too close to the original wording? Go ahead and take a second to look at this. Look at these two sentences, compare them. What do you think? So once you've read over these sentences, you'll notice some things here. We're using the word price tag, that comes across. So instead of high, I say steep. Instead of attribute, I said quality. Instead of endows, I said gives. And I switched the order here. So instead of saying a high price tag is not the only attribute that endows an object with status, a steep price tag is not the only quality that gives status. It's pretty close, right? So I haven't really paraphrased here. This is patchwriting. I've kept the same sentence order. I've used a thesaurus to switch out a few words, but there's only like 4 or 5 words that are different. It's still really close to the original wording. So this is patchwriting. I want to avoid this. Let's take a look. Let's say I try it again. So I'll bring this up here. So here again is my original quote. Read this second sentence. If you need to pause the video, you can. Compare it to the first sentence up here. Is this in my own words or is it still patchwriting? Go ahead and take a look. So in this case, again, it's still patchwriting because I'm using the word high. I changed price tag to cost, but I've got status. It's pretty much the same order. So it's really not that much better. Same wording. I'm relying too much on the author's wording. Okay, so let's say I try this one more time. So this is my third attempt. Okay, so now look at this last sentence here, and this sentence up here, the original quote. So the key is, am I making the same point, but is it in my own words now? Go ahead and compare this last sentence and this quote. Did I do a good job at paraphrasing? What do you think? Take a look. So in this case, you might be inclined to say, well, you used the word status. She uses the word status, and that's true. And she uses the word price. But in this case, those are the only two words that match, and everything else is pretty much different, right? So I've reorganized, it's in a different order. I'm not relying on the same wording. Two words are the same, but it's pretty different. Whereas here I was pretty much just following the pattern of the sentence and switching out words. Here I've taken ownership of the idea by putting it in my own words, but also I'm still citing her, but it's not as close to the original wording as some of these paraphrases or patch writing. So the key is to make it in your own words, like I've done here. So as much as possible, make it different, but make it say the same idea. So I really could maybe even switch this out more. I could say it's cost instead of its price, and that'd be even better. But it's okay to use that word status, right? Some of those words can match up. If it's just one or two words in the sentence, that's probably fine. But if it's really relying too much on the original sentence, that's a problem. So another option would be to mix quotation and paraphrase. So here I've quoted original pieces of the quote, but I'm also rewording. Somewhat explains that a high price tag, in quotes, is just one of many factors that provide an object with status. So see here, I changed some of the wording, but where I did use her wording, I put quotation marks. So you can mix and match, you can quote directly, you can completely paraphrase, but don't be in the middle where you're just trying to reword it, but you're still relying on that original wording. That's called patch writing. So that's something to be on the lookout for as you integrate your sources.